it's not always about which creators' content performed the best with their audience that deems a long-term partnership. It's sometimes just being the person who is easy to work with, who takes criticism and feedback really positively, who can turn content around for brands pretty quickly, who are really personally passionate about the brand and that want to align their lifestyle with that brand.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Videocraft show presented by Husky. I am Jon Santiago, and every other week I interview content creators as well as industry makers about subjects designed to help you become a more business savvy creator. And this week's topic, we're talking about indispensability. How do you become so indispensable to a brand that they keep coming back to you for more? They keep coming back to you for more opportunities to reach your audience, and they keep coming back to you for more opportunities to do sponsorship brand deals with them. I am interviewing somebody this week who has a wealth of experience, more than a decade actually, in public relations and in influencer marketing, who can offer some guidance to you if you're feeling a little bit lost. Kristyn Snell is the founder of ModernSpeak. They are a creator agency. They work primarily with content creators in travel and in lifestyle and in parenting and in tech. And they help these creators find brand deals that align with them. And Kristen brings a wealth of experience to the job. As I mentioned, she actually worked for tourism boards in Calgary, as well as in her greater state or province, I should say, of Alberta, working with travel creators on campaigns there. And so she has firsthand knowledge, on the ground knowledge of what it's like to be a brand that is looking to partner with a creator. But now she has even more experience of working directly with creators to partner with brands and to land those deals with the brands that work for them. So in this particular episode, Kristen and I talk about a variety of subjects, including the inner workings of ModernSpeak and how they rose to where they are today, starting back a few years ago, not too long ago. And we also talk about how to negotiate payment terms with brands and companies if you are looking for brand deals, how to go about doing that, some best practices that she recommends on her end. And then we also talk about how to make yourself, again, indispensable. How do you do such good work that a brand wants to come back and make repeat business with you over and over again? We are going to talk about those subjects and more on this particular episode of the Videocraft show presented by Husky. But before we jump into that, just want to remind y'all, if you haven't, make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever it is that you get your podcasts. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, you name it. Every single player, we are available, and we would love for you to leave us a review as well. Leave us a review wherever it is that you get your podcasts. So let's go ahead and not waste any more time. Let's jump straight into my conversation with Kristyn Snell of ModernSpeak. Kristyn Snell, thank you for joining me on this episode of the Videocraft show presented by Husky.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this is awesome to have you on. You know, we actually got connected via Lizzie Peirce, who you work with. And it's great for me to have you on the show because this is a different direction that I'm going, trying to talk to some industry makers and people who are working with creators to empower them and help them essentially build up their businesses as creators. So this is going to be exciting for me to chat with you for the time that we have allotted here. And usually where I like to start conversations is just in terms of where you began. How did you end up on this path to where you are today, working with creators and influencers and as well as brands on some of these campaigns that you work on?
Definitely. My journey to this point has been a little bit of an interesting one. I got my degree in public relations, and I went right into working with agencies on that side, representing brands. And that job eventually brought me into the tourism industry, where I worked for the destination tourism board of the city that I live in, so Calgary to start, and then moved over to the provincial tourism board, which was Travel Alberta. And while I was at Travel Alberta, I had the opportunity to start working with a lot of YouTube creators and Instagram creators that were in the travel space that were looking to come to Alberta and share all there is to know about this beautiful place with their followers. So I had the opportunity to not only work directly with some of these amazing creators, but I also got to work with their agents too. And then that side of this industry sort of piqued my interest, to know that there was this kind of whole other talent management agency type world happening, where YouTubers were getting paid to come to places like Alberta and create all this amazing content for the tourism board, also to promote to their audiences. And I really got fascinated by that. The job that I was in at the time was a maternity leave cover, so it eventually had sort of an end time. And I've always been very entrepreneurial since I was a little kid. And during this time, I had a side hustle where I was selling letterboards, which are those like felt-lined, wood-framed message boards that, you know, sometimes see like the mommy bloggers on Instagram holding them with like their baby bump, and it's like 6 months, or once the baby's born, they put with it, and it's like, yeah, the baby's 6 months now on the other side. So I was selling these letterboards, and I happened to kind of come into the world of mommy bloggers as a result. And I wanted to try and get these boards. I'm based in Canada, but I wanted to get these boards a little bit more recognized in the United States. So I found a few based kind of all over the US that were willing to promote our letterboards to their audiences. And one of the things that I found when I was working with these parenting creators was they didn't have agents, and they didn't really have the understanding of what it meant to work with a brand. So they didn't know who I was at all. And here I was asking them to do a huge favor for me. And they were like, sure, absolutely, I'd love to do it, without asking for anything. No monetary payment, no commission on sales. There was like, they were just doing it. And so that didn't sit well with me. And after like a few of these, I was like, I need to let these women know that they need to be charging for their, you know, for their relevance, for their trust that they've built with their audiences, and they need to be charging brands for these things. So I talked to a couple of them, and they were like, we had no idea. How do we even do that? Where do you start? And so I kind of went back to the knowledge that I had working at Travel Alberta with some of these other creators agents, some of the questions that they would ask me as a brand. And then I kind of started to like figure out a little bit of a program to sort of teach some of these women how to interact with brands. And so during this time, they were like, I don't like doing this. You need to do it. I never want you to leave. So kind of overnight, I ended up with a bit of an agency, and it went from having 2 mummy influencers to like 14 in about a month. And as I was leaving my job at Travel Alberta, ModernSpeak was born, and it went from a letterboard company to an influencer management agency.
Wow, that's incredible. No, it seems like you were able to basically, I mean, you were already knowledgeable about this space from having worked with Travel Alberta, and then also just, you know, knowing what you wanted as a consumer for that space. It just made a lot of sense for you to go and reach out to these mommy bloggers and build up those relationships with them. I'm curious about where, you know, how, around what time did you start this side hustle, and how long did it take for you to get traction on it?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate. I kind of got in right at the start of these letterboards gaining popularity. So it was about 6 months from when I started it to when it turned into the agency. So I was about recognizing that my mat leave cover wasn't going to get extended for a third time. So I started to kind of have to think about where I was going to go from there. And I knew I wanted to stay in the space. I had really enjoyed working with creators, and I really enjoyed like storytelling and all of that type of stuff. So I knew that that was the direction that I wanted to maintain. And to sort of bring up Lizzie again, her and her husband, Chris Howe, came to Alberta and worked with us on a couple of campaigns. And I just became really good friends with them, and we built up a really nice relationship. And they were doing some really interesting stuff in the travel space and building their brands, and asked if I wanted to kind of help with some of their outreach, and that's how our relationship started.
Now, did you
and
have
that would have been, yeah. I was just going to say that would have been like 2 years ago now. No, it's all good. I was just thinking like that would have been about 2019 when I went off on my own.
Oh wow! So this is still like, you know, relatively new for yourself. You're constantly trying to teach yourself and learn along the way, and you've been able to scale the business up too, where you have a team of people who are working with you. It's not just yourself.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. How has that whole process been in terms of building up the business and then expanding and having other people assist you with all the work that you're doing at ModernSpeak?
Yeah, that's actually been one of the most interesting parts of this. So in my previous life, I never really, like on the teams that I'd worked with, I'd always had managers or bosses or people that I reported to. So I've never been in a position where I had contractors or others reporting to me. So from like a growth perspective, it's been really kind of fun for me to sort of be on this other side now of building a team and leading a team and learning, you know, what different kind of aspects are involved in doing that. I grew the team. So 2019 is when I went off on my own. I did it for about a year by myself. And then we started to get quite busy and I was recognized I couldn't do it on my own anymore. And so in January of 2020, I hired 2 full-time staff. And we went to New York for the New York Times travel show, which is a big conference that they used to put on where all the tourism boards, major travel providers, so like your cruise lines, your airlines, massive resorts, all come to this one conference for a networking opportunity. And that was January 2020. And less than 2 months later, we were in the midst of a pandemic. So it was one of those things where I was like, you know, you look in the mirror and you're like, wow, I've done it. I've made it. I'm in New York. I've got this team. We're hustling in this travel industry. And we were just all like buzzing with excitement. And we got home and I had like hundreds of business cards that I was like putting into categories of who I wanted to connect with first. And I was so eager. And then travel just basically disappeared for about 2 years. So we've been really trying to build back that travel part of our business again. And like everybody, we had to go through some natural pivots during that 2-year period of time of how we were going to keep the business sustaining with creators and how we could kind of reinvent the work that we were doing. So it was, an interesting time.
Yeah, that is incredible. Again, to think about it in terms of the lifespan of your company, starting it basically, you know, a couple of years ago, and then having this period where it was, you know, more than a year. I mean, now travel is starting to pick up here in 2021, but more than a year where travel was just pretty much on pause. And that was where a lot of your expertise came in. I'm really curious if you could expand more just on how you went about like making the necessary pivot to be able to sustain yourself during that, you know, during that trying time of when COVID first hit us around the world.
Yeah. So at the time that it hit, we had a pretty dedicated roster of about 15 to 20 creators. Amongst those, we sort of work in a couple different categories: travel, tech, lifestyle, and parenting. On the lifestyle side, it's sort of like your fashion, beauty type home creators. Mm-hmm. But on the travel side, we definitely lost a few just because there was that moment in time where reaching out to tourism boards and trying to build up any kind of business was really tricky because they were not there for that at the moment. But we did get really creative. So in the province that I live in, and because I had a relationship with some of the local tourism boards, we sort of used that COVID period of time to build up content that the tourism boards could use in the future when doors did open again and travel resumed. So rather than making a case for promotion on an influencer's campaign or on an influencer's channel, like come to Alberta, it's not the time. We did was we used all of that time where locations were really quiet. Like I live really close to Banff National Park, mm-hmm. and in the summer months or like pre-COVID, it was so busy. Like hundreds of thousands of people would be standing along Lake Louise, and it would be really hard to be able to capture what you wanted your hero imagery or your hero content to be as a tourism board. So we took the time while it was really quiet to go in there and start building out video and photo assets for the brand to use when the time came. Luckily, with some of our creators who were in the travel space, they also had other niches that they were working into and leaning into, like tech was a big one. So in some aspects, even though travel went away, some of the influencer opportunities went up because people were on their phones more than ever. Consumer brands, consumer goods were definitely doing way more in the space of influencer marketing. On the parenting side, it was really big to try and bring in some like non-screen type toys and educational things, because so many parents were in that, like in the trenches of how many more hours can my child possibly sit in front of a screen while, we're trying to maintain work and all of these other things. So it had its blessings and its curses, I'm sure.
Well, it sounds like too, I mean, you were you had a diverse roster of creators that you were working with and you continue to work with today, even though you had that, initially began in like the mommy blog parenting type space, and then with your experience in travel, you also had other creators who were working in other different niches. Can you talk to me about how you went about expanding that roster from initially working with the parenting related creators that you work with to like the diverse array of creators that you work with now?
Definitely. So the parenting ones, pretty much across all verticals that we work in, a lot of it has been word of mouth. We've been really fortunate that working with a couple parenting bloggers, they tell their other friends and it kind of trickles down from there. So we were able to get a lot of creators interested in us through that. On the travel side, that one sort of started because of the Travel Alberta connection and some of the relationships that I had built through working in that space. And travel's always been sort of my favorite component of public relations and storytelling and all of the other kind of aspects that I had studied and have invested sort of my time and resources into learning. So I knew that was always a space that I wanted to kind of lean into. And it just so happened that some of the creators, again, through word of mouth, that potentially Chris or Lizzie had told about me, they were more in the tech space. So doing like camera reviews or different things around like drones and whatever else it might be. So then that side kind of started to build. And then through the parenting side, one thing that's actually been really interesting, and I truly like admire how difficult of a job it is to be a parenting creator. But a lot of them have actually started to kind of move into a space of not wanting their children to be in their content anymore. So now they're reinventing their channels and their brands to be more focused on their journey versus always having their children in it. So that's where some of these now lifestyle creators have come in, because we can't, even though they have children and they have families, they're less focused on sharing that with their audiences and more on like their fitness journey or maybe like their DIY or whatever the areas that they've become passionate about. Right. Mental health. There's so many different ones. So the parenting one still is there for sure, but it's interesting to see how even in 3 years that I've been working with some of these creators, how they've evolved their brand and how they've evolved types of content and brands that they want to work with.
Yeah, I mean, it's the space is always changing. And, even with people when they start their journey, maybe they might have started in one particular niche and then they want to move into something completely different. How do you go about supporting them when they decide to make those kinds of transitions as a creator? Do they look to you for advice? Do they ever ask you about like, well, how will this maybe potentially impact, the brand deals that I have with some companies? I'm just kind of wondering about, what those conversations might look like.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. They do. It's nice to have, these relationships have formed over so many years. So it's a true partnership, the way that we work with our creators. So they definitely come to us for advice all the time. I will be honest, some of them, the transitions are easier than other, depending on the type of creator it is. We have had situations where it's a full refresh, a full rebrand. So a lot of the audience has sort of come to you from the beginning to follow along your parenting journey and because they love your kids and they want to watch how them grow. And so when that stops, that audience that you've curated and cultivated is kind of like, oh, okay, this isn't what I signed up for necessarily. This isn't the type of content that I'm used to being here for. So sometimes creators do lose a bit of their following because they've kind of like, those creators have now moved on, or those followers have now moved on to follow maybe a different parenting creator. But what I do find happens is once they sort of find their momentum in whatever their new brand looks like, the followers come back. They're different followers, but they're still able to kind of gain and elevate that existing following. From a brand side, we're on so many people's media lists for certain types of brands. So then that's another bit of a tricky transition, because now as an agent and as a creator, we need to now build relationships with new types of brands that aren't necessarily the diapers, baby food, whatever those kind of parenting pillars typically are, depending on kids' ages. So I think like a lot of it, it can be work. It can be work for, of course, the creator to have to build out this whole new idea of what their content's going to be and what their story and what their angle is. And then on our side, it's just building new relationships and figuring out how to kind of pivot with whatever the new kind of brand journey looks like. And so we're fortunate because we work sort of across 4 verticals that we do have relationships with brands in all of those verticals. So if a creator does decide to go from parenting to maybe a bit more on like the general lifestyle fashion side of things, we do sometimes have those relationships to kind of step in and support that. I'm actually a mom myself. So from the parenting perspective, I'm extremely supportive of the creators that decide that they want to take that step back and not share every aspect of their children's life. Some of these creators have, 200 to 500 plus thousand followers. So from a safety perspective, I don't know if I had that many followers, I would want, the daily activities of my child being online either. I think it's a personal decision, and I support those that do. And I also support those that decide that it's not the right decision for them at that time for whatever reason. So on that side, like there's never any challenges. I think I'm just really honest with the creators that I work with that there could be a period of time here where we have to do a bit of a reinvention and we have to kind of find our way again, which is totally fine. It's just like, it's about expectations and understanding, like you may have gone from doing, 10 partnerships a month to there could be a moment where that's not going to necessarily be the case for a bit until we reinvent.
Right. Yeah, that's something, this idea of how much exposure should you give your kids if you have kids and you are a creator is a topic that's come up before on this show. I remember talking to another travel creator who, had just had kids at the time and had featured them, as babies in some of his videos. But, to a certain extent, like, I mean, imagine if we were growing up and our parents were content creators or had like these massive platforms.
Yeah.
It's already embarrassing enough when like your parents show your baby pictures or your childhood pictures to like their small audience of friends and family. Now imagine what that experience is like for those kids of creators as they grow up and they're in front of like thousands and thousands of eyeballs. It can be, there's like no guidebook or rule guide around how to navigate that just yet.
Yeah, no. And one thing that I think, just to build off that I find really interesting is we're now in a place too where, as kids, we were like, people, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, a ballerina or firefighter or whatever these like sort of everyday careers were. And now kids are like, I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be an Instagrammer. I want to be a content creator. I want to film and do photography and work with brands and have a reality TV show. So like, it's so funny that we live in this space now where whether, as parents or as we're influencing that with this being a part of our, like I have a 7-year-old and he started his own little YouTube channel and he reviews like his own toys that he already has. And wow. It's just wild because I think COVID really elevated that because so many kids were having way more screen time than they would have normally. Like, I mean, I can speak for myself that I put him in front of a decent amount of YouTube. So he learned that was a job, like Ryan's World. He's like, I want to be Ryan when I grow up. And so it's definitely like a space, to your point, that's just constantly evolving. And I don't actually work with any children. I only work with adults, but I can only imagine what that side of the business is like too.
Yeah. I wonder too in the future what it's going to look like for someone like you mentioned Ryan's World, Ryan Kaji, his family. Like he's only what, I think 10 or just close to 10 years old, or is he?
Maybe.
He's still a kid, but I wonder in 20 years is he still going to be in the public spotlight. Like, this is like a whole new world. We have, maybe the only thing comparable
Yeah,
to that is just child actors, and how they grow up in the limelight. And so it's
for
like an
sure.
experiment that we're just kind of watch play out in real time right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like that's probably the closest thing you tie it to is child actors. But I'm just so curious to see like this instant gratification piece that comes with being on social media, and we all struggle with it as adults. But I'm so interested to see how that's going to play out for children too. Like that constant need for like likes and comments and validation and all of those things. How that will attach in their school life and all of the other stuff. So
Yeah. I'm curious. I know this is going a little bit tangential to the conversation that we're having, but I think it's important for anybody who's listening to this, if they're creators themselves and they have children. But I'm
mhm.
curious how you mentioned your son who's 7 now. He has started his own little YouTube channel. How do you go about parenting him and teaching him, how to navigate this world of of social media that's like an ever present thing in our lives these days?
Yeah, it's tricky. The way that I've handled it, so when I say he has a YouTube, he thinks he has a YouTube.
Uh,
I let him film videos. I let him film videos and we put them on the computer and he gets to watch them, but they're not actually listed online. I've considered letting him build a channel and then just keeping everything private for his own sort of use. But I think like it's interesting to see how he's built confidence in his ability to talk about things.
yeah.
So that's been really interesting in this. So like I think that there are definitely skills to be had. I haven't let him go as far as to actually be on these things where he's like watching TikTok videos, or YouTube is kind of like we've kind of pulled back a little bit from that too lately because it was getting a little bit alarming. And as a child on YouTube, as anyone on YouTube, you can go from watching one thing to another thing to another thing to something
It's
completely
never
different
ending. Yeah.
in the matter of seconds. And so there was times when I'd like keep my ear out for what he was watching, and I'd be like, okay, that's Ryan's or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden it was like, whoa, where did you end up? Because what you're listening to right now is not what I thought that you were listening to. So I think parental restrictions and things like that are important. And just I don't know. Honestly, I wish that there was like more creators out there that were parenting bloggers that were moving into the space of talking about exactly this. And like, it would be cool to hear podcasts from like child psychologists or other experts who can actually speak to the best ways to navigate through this time with your kids. Cause I mean, as adults, we're all on social media. And when he gets to an age that he has a phone, he's going to be on social media. So it's hard to be like, you're not allowed when, he sees me watching YouTube because I do that for work and I have to. And he'll be like, well, how come you get to do it? Like, it's my job.
That's the tricky part of your work, right, Kristen, is that this is your job. This is what you do. So when your son sees you, you know, watching YouTube channels of cool creators who are traveling around the world, he's wondering, well, why can't I do that too?
Yeah, exactly. So
Well,
setting expectations.
exactly. Well, in terms of, I mean, to go back onto the topic we're discussing in this discussion about working with creators and helping them work with brands, tell me about how you've been able to build all these relationships with brands. Obviously, with the amount of experience that you've had, I'm sure you've come across and interacted with plenty of companies and people who work at companies. But talk to me about just building up those relationships and then facilitating those connections with the creators that you work with.
hmm Yeah, for sure. So there's just to kind of provide a bit of context in how we work. There's a couple different ways. With each creator, we do inbound leads. So anything that comes directly through them, they'll either forward it to us, or sometimes we have it so in like their Instagram profile or bio, it'll say like for partnerships or collaborations, contact ModernSpeak. So we'll get some inbound leads for sure. And then usually we try like once a quarter to build out a list of like wish list of dream brands that the creator would like to work with. We also try and align what milestones might be coming up in someone's life. So if someone's having a baby or getting married or going on a trip, buying a house, whatever kind of those big moments in life are, we build out those as well into like a timeline. And then we try and figure out what brands might fit within those pieces to have like a really authentic brand partnership. I think authenticity in these things is so important. And when I first started, I think I saw a lot more creators taking on jobs with the right dollar value and maybe not necessarily thinking about what value that brand had to them or to their audience. And that's completely swapped. I would say now of all the creators that I work with, they're very quick to say no if the opportunity doesn't fit. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around that, especially like in my friend circle and the people who know what I do for a living. They feel like there's this disingenuous, is that the word?
Disingenuous.
Like creators, creators can be disingenuous with their brand partnerships sometimes because they're like, oh, well, they got paid to do that. Yeah. And yes, for sure. But I also know in my experience of working with the roster that we do, they won't do something if they don't truly like the product, believe in the product, or have tested and tried it to know that it's something that they would stand behind and promote. And I think that that's really important. And I think coming back to relationships, I have built really strong relationships with the creators that we work with, as well as with the brands, because we're always coming from a place of transparency and honesty. And those pieces don't always exist in this industry. So I think like it sets a really like good precedent with brands when we are really honest. And if something doesn't fit for one creator, we're fortunate that we have a roster of others. So if someone says no to that opportunity, we can say, sorry, it's not going to be a fit for that creator, but what about, here's 6 other creators that sort of fit within that same niche and have like a similar audience demographic that you're looking for. Would any of these work? And oftentimes we're able to convert jobs over to another creator that creator might have said no to. And so that's another way where we're able to do outbound pitching to brands, which is when we're going to them with opportunities. And with that, we present the roster. We get really creative about how we're framing what creators might make the most sense for that brand by building out a bit more than just a so-and-so wants to work with you because we heard that you pay a lot of money or you're doing this campaign or we saw it on Instagram. It's like, how do we actually build a relationship with a brand? And sometimes this takes months before they have a campaign that opens up that aligns with whatever that creator is working on. So we send people Starbucks gift cards and we keep the conversations open, and we're PR people at heart. So I find that like that relationship piece is just something that's like ingrained in our team of just checking in on people. And when like with our creators, when they're going through their own like personal journey and milestones and things are happening in their personal lives, we're the first to like advocate for them on behalf of the brand. Like, sorry, so-and-so's going through a bit of a rough time right now. They're going to need a few extra weeks. Like, we really hope you can appreciate it. And I think it's nice to be sort of that middle person that can protect the creator from that brand sometimes, because it's easier to be a third person and be able to stick up and kind of speak to the brand than constantly having to be the creator that's, oh, this is how much I need to be paid. And like all of those kind of uncomfortable conversations that can come up between a brand and a creator. It's nice to have that sort of third party person to manage those for you.
Yeah, I mean, you're able,
and then we can be the bad guy too.
Yeah, you can essentially serve as a buffer between the creator and the brand, right? Like you said, you can kind of be the bad guy rather than the creator having to go out there and stress about those things, because ultimately what they want to focus on is just making stuff, right? And where you come into play is just being able to enable them with these enable them to continue doing what they're doing with business opportunities to work with these companies and brands who are trying to reach their audiences.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering too about I guess like saying no to opportunities. You've seen like an evolution in creators over the time that you've started working with them at your time with the tourism boards in Alberta. But how do you assess opportunities that are may not be right fits for creators? Like what are you advising, or what would you advise creators to to look at when it comes to assessing a brand deal that may be right for them or may not be right for them?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of things to unpack there. So first of all, I would say as a creator, it's always a good idea to build out your brand wish list of all the brands that you're already using. Like, I think a really good place to start is like, look in your closet, look at your car, look in your home, figure out what those brands are that as a consumer you're already using without someone having to pay you to use them. Start there, build out what that list is. And then when you have competitive brands coming to you that want to work with you, if that competitive brand doesn't have a product that's of equal or superior quality to the one that you're already using as a everyday consumer, and it's going to potentially jeopardize your opportunity in the future to work with that brand that you truly, really love and that you can align your values with, I would say that's a good place to start leaning into no's, if that makes sense. I would also say, like, now we live in a world of, it's very important to check how authentic brands are being and their integrity and their values on social media. We've gone through a lot of really big social media cultural moments in the past couple of years. And, a lot of brands have been accused of doing things like greenwashing or, just changing their logo to a pride logo because it's June and all of these things. So like figuring out what the true values and, of that brand are before you're willing to say yes. And there are some resources that have come out recently where you can kind of check brand health scores to see, like, is this a brand that's not going to come out to sort of bite me down the road because they've gone ahead and done something that now is going to put me in an awkward position because I've just partnered with them.
Right.
So I think those are a couple things that are really important to consider. From like a contractual perspective, I don't advise any of the creators I work with to ever sign on to anything that has the words in perpetuity on it, meaning forever. I actually heard a story about an LA creator who started her career probably over 10 years ago. And when she started, she did a beef jerky campaign. And 10 years later, she's now like a very well-respected and celebrated vegan creator in Los Angeles. And she had signed an in perpetuity contract very early on in her career. And these photos came out 10 years later and started to resurface of they were on a billboard or they were in a magazine or something like that, where, you don't know, like, as humans, we change so much over the course of months, let alone years. And you just never know where you're going to be in that period of time. So I say if a brand is really pushing for an in perpetuity contract, walk away, say no. I advise a year max on anything for the creators that I work with. Another really important thing to kind of look out for, because a lot of creators can get burned on this, is like exclusivity and usage. Usage meaning, how they're going to use that content outside of your channel. So if they're going to use it in a newsletter or on their website, if they're going to do a paid campaign with it, those things. I'm just going to circle back for a second. Exclusivity is when, of course, like if I'm Nike, I don't want you working with Reebok for X amount of time. So, however, though, one thing that a lot of creators don't realize is that there's something called implied exclusivity. And that is, so if your exclusivity with Nike is only 30 days, but your usage with the brand is 6 months, and they're going to be using your likeness for advertising on their website, for their newsletters, whatever those other pieces of material might be, you're essentially giving them 6 months exclusivity, because any other brands or people that are making decisions in those competitive organizations are going to see you associated with those brands for that length of time. Creators need to be charging for that usage as if it's an exclusivity clause.
Got it. Okay.
So that's another thing. Yeah. So another easy way to like kind of lean into a no if that's not going to align with you as a creator and the type of content that you create. So if I'm, a beauty creator and I'm sampling like a different lipstick every month, something like that's not going to work for me, because it's going to potentially put me at risk to lose out on other brand opportunities if I'm going to sign sort of my soul away for a long period of time with one.
Got it. Yeah. If you're the type of creator that you're basically doing reviews, for example, right? And you have to sample a bunch of different products. It wouldn't make sense to sign that type of exclusivity where you're just essentially married to one brand for an extended period of time. Now there are some creators where that does make sense, and that was something too that I wanted to talk to you about, was just being able to land a steady stream of sponsorship opportunities with a brand. How should a creator go about being a creator that brands can go to and trust on a regular basis? Like, what are the qualities I think that brands are looking for from creators to be at a point where it's like, hey, I like you. Let's keep doing more deals. Let's keep this thing going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another great question. I want to start that question by saying that I think that the creators that do lean into brands for long periods of time are better set up for those types of opportunities than the creator who's consistently jumping from competitive brand to competitive brand to competitive brand, because it isn't showing that brand loyalty piece. And so I think as a brand, when you go onto someone's channel, that is something that you're going to look for when you want to decide, which creators could potentially be a good fit for a long-term brand partnership. There are creators that do reviews, and that's just part of the deal. But there's certain things like, am I really going to be changing my vitamin company every month if I'm a creator? So there's just certain types of content where it just doesn't make sense to always be jumping around to a new one. So that's just an example. But as a creator sort of just starting out that maybe doesn't have a ton of clout in that particular community, maybe they're not already established creator in the camera tech type scene, but they want to be, I would say again, what are the products and brands that you're already using as a paid consumer? And then how can you show value to that brand on your own channel by creating content for them, by tagging them in stuff that they're not paying you to tag you in? Getting on their radar is really important. Now that there's so many different categories of creators, and nano creators, one of them, essentially anyone who has a social media account is classified as a nano influencer because it's 10,000 followers or less. So the competition in this space is now bigger than it ever has been before. So one thing that I've also learned in the partnerships that I've seen over the years, it's not always about which creators' content performed the best with their audience that deems a long-term partnership. It's sometimes just being the person who is easy to work with, who takes criticism and feedback really positively, who can turn content around for brands pretty quickly, who are really personally passionate about the brand and that want to align their lifestyle with that brand. And in the landscape of social media these days, it's so important that brands are coming out with so much content all the time. We've got TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all of these channels that need their own original, unique content. And it's so many pieces of content a day, a week. So other ways that creators can build partnerships with brands is, even if you don't have a large following, doing content creation relationships. So saying I'm going to create 5 reels for you a month. Just send me some product. I'm happy to do it. Maybe this is a way to build a partnership, build some kind of trust, build some rapport with a brand. A lot of creators are starting doing that just for product only, but then it leads into a longer term opportunity to then be a paid content contributor for that brand. And then as you grow, then there's opportunities to then be a paid promoter of that brand with your audience.
Right. Yeah. No,
does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. That's a big need for some of these companies, because maybe you might be working with an e-commerce brand that's built totally off Shopify, but they don't necessarily have a content marketing department, right? And they know the importance of content marketing. Exactly. They don't have somebody who's in-house creating that content for them. Well, a creator, that's their specialty. A creator can go in and make stuff and essentially make them assets that they can distribute across their social media channels. The brand, that is.
Yeah, for sure. And also just another interesting example, one of the creators that I work with was a dedicated user for a certain brand of cameras. I'm not gonna name drop what that was, but a competitive brand came to them and said, "Hey, we want you to use our camera for 3 months, and these are the things that we want you to do with it." And this creator went from being a very avid user of that former camera because he never had an opportunity to have that much length of time with another brand to see what the differences might be, and is now like, okay, I actually truly, maybe he wasn't a automatic fan of that brand or a consumer of that brand or whatever that might be, but has now become one because they've given the opportunity to see what can be done in that length of period of time. So speaking to brands, I think it's really important also to build out longer term relationships with creators rather than doing these one and dones. Because from a consumer's perspective, if I'm following a creator and I see them jumping around from lipstick to lipstick to lipstick, I'm like not really sure what to do with that. But if I see someone consistently every day using the same thing and truly like passionately speaking to that thing, it's like a game changer for me. I've been influenced by creators because of those long-term partnerships over the one and dones.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think about this quite a lot when it comes to, as a marketer myself, is just how many times have I bought stuff just based on, hearing about it from somebody that I follow online. I mean, there's quite a few. We all follow people who are influencers, and that word of mouth recommendation is so powerful. Would you say that is
Absolutely.
one of the, I guess, like one of the main selling points that a creator might have if they're trying to pitch a brand, right? Because going back to what you were talking about in the beginning, where some of these creators initially didn't really understand the value that they had, and were essentially happy to just promote something for free. I mean, that could be a main selling point, is just the fact that like it's you are pitching something as a real person versus, hey, this is just an ad that was paid for and there's no real personality behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and as someone who puts creators forward for a campaign that probably has like 10 to 15 creators also on it, when you watch everyone's content go live, you can tell the creators that truly love the product and that actually enjoyed creating with it and making with it than the ones that were just like, okay, this is a paycheck. I think it's become really obvious in the way that people are creating their content, the way that they're speaking to their audience about a product. And I've seen a lot of creators too, where, they get paid for X amount of deliverables for a particular campaign, but because they love the product so much, they'll continue to share it over time because they were like, I truly actually want you to buy this because it changed my day or whatever it might have been. This part of my life is different now because of this brand, and I truly care about it. And I think like that's where it comes to, like, if my best friend is going to tell me to buy something because she really enjoys it and I trust her opinion, I'm more likely to buy it. And I think creators have built these friendships with people that they've never met in their life, but like are checking in on them on a regular basis. If someone goes offline for a couple of days, people are literally like, where are you? Are you okay? Like, is everything fine? It's like this community that's very dedicated to what these creators have going on in their lives. And whether it's sort of just guidance and learning what works and what doesn't work, or if it's, a bit of like role model or kind of like some idolization happening, like whatever the reasons might be, they have cultivated a really strong, trusted relationship with their followers. And brands are, that's what brands are paying for. 100% is that, and like their likeness. So being able to use their testimonials or their content on their own channels, or being able to kind of put more paid behind that and use it out to reach even more people, like there's value in that.
Yeah, for sure. Now I want to dial back here, Kristen, and talk a little bit more about, the work that you do at ModernSpeak, and specifically how you go about building up that roster. Obviously, you're still trying to expand, you're still trying to grow. What is it that you are looking for when you are maybe reaching out to creators to potentially work with them? And how are you assessing and building up those relationships with new creators to work with over time?
Mm-hmm. So I think like one thing to consider as a creator looking for an agency, because this is sort of where we start, is we're an extension of your team and of your brand. And so being able to have a need for an agent in the first place, a lot of creators will reach out and say like, you know, we need an agent. And then when we get down to like having the conversation of like, why, I think there's like this sense of like, I want an agent. There's like a bit of kind of cachet and having a team working with you, of course. But if a creator can't handle the influx of deals and things that are coming into them at the moment, then it's probably time to look for an agent. If it's like, I'm overwhelmed, I'm getting way too much interest and outreach, and I just can't handle it, good time to potentially bring somebody in. And if a large majority of those opportunities that are coming in are paid campaigns, because a lot of creators will also just get a lot of product campaigns, and that's a great place to start, and for them to continue to build up their audience and all of that type of stuff. But as a commission only, typically agencies are commission only. It's tricky for us to work on stuff when it's just product only. So just kind of like set the sort of starting point of like, as a creator, when is a good time to look for an agent? Those are some things to take into consideration. For us, we try and find creators mostly in North America is where we work. And we like to continue to work in these verticals of tech, travel, lifestyle, and parenting. One thing that's really beneficial of working in these verticals is when you do have a diverse group of creators within that scope, meaning, you know, you've got some micros, some macros, some mega influencers, different sizes from different places in the world, kind of coming at it from a different approach. It's great because you're able to then use an inbound opportunity that may have come in from another creator to secure that for them, but then also to bring in the others and say like, we also work with these folks. Would any of them be aligned with this campaign? And then that as like an umbrella effect kind of brings them under and gives them a bit more opportunity for paid campaigns because something may have come in big from another brand through another creator.
Gotcha.
So we try and stick with those. Go ahead.
Oh, continue. I'm sorry, cut out there.
Oh, okay. No problem. Yeah, so that's where we start. Like people often ask, like, how many followers do I need to have to be considered to have an agent? And I don't think that there is an answer to that because we also work with some creators that have, 10 to 25,000 followers but they're creating such cool work and they're really relatable, and micro influencers oftentimes have way higher engagement, way more conversions than some of their, larger followed counterparts. So brands are really leaning into this micro nano creator space. I think it's just having a brand and a story that's unique, that is resonating with your audience, that is resonating with brands is really what we look for, because we want to make sure that we're not wasting the creator's time, that they're not wasting their own time by coming with us if we don't have the relationships needed to get them the work that they are wanting to see out of their profile. So I think like the way that we do it is if there is a creator that's reached out to us for interest, or we've reached out to them, we start by just having a really honest conversation to make sure it's going to be the right fit and that it's a right value fit too. We want to make sure that we're working with creators that are just good people, whatever that might look like. We just want to work with really good people that are doing really good stuff, and that we can proudly stand behind and say like, this is our roster and we're stoked to be working with all of these people because they do good work. We can stand behind the work that they do, and we know that they're gonna deliver the best that they can for the brand.
Gotcha.
So those are all really important things for us.
How long do those conversations typically last? Like, is it a lot of back and forth, maybe initially through email and then eventually now maybe it turns into a video call, or do those things kind of happen pretty quickly where and they know that, hey, I think this could be a good fit here and we should maybe partner up and team up together?
I think like for us, if they reach out to us, regardless, we do like a good audit of the channels that they're producing content on, just to make sure that there's no what we might consider red flags, or that we know like maybe potentially a brand might consider a red flag down the road that would cause them to not want to work with them. So we do that. And if we've kind of done our thorough search and it looks like the content that they're creating is performing really well with their audience, the content's fun, it's original, and, we'll also look to see if they've done paid partnerships in the past. And now like that paid partnership tool really helps, or, looking for like the hashtag ad and things like that. We'll then move probably into a phone call. I think you can just really get so much more accomplished in a phone call than you can in a whole bunch of back and forth email threads.
Yeah.
And it's really just, it's quick to just be able to pick up the phone, hop on a video call, say, this is what we're all about. We'd love to know what you're all about. And then we'll let them know right away if we think there's a fit, give them some time to think about whether or not we're a fit. Oftentimes, if creators are shopping for an agent, they're usually probably reaching out to a couple of them, just to find whichever might be the right fit. So, and then, we'll wait to hear back from them if it is or isn't, and then kind of take it from there.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the auditing process? What are you looking at in terms of a creator's, I guess, key KPIs, key performance indicators, or metrics to assess whether or not there might be an opportunity there with them?
Definitely. So there's a couple of plugins for Chrome and a couple of websites that you can go to actually see a grade rating that a creator is given. And that grade rating takes into consideration bots, paid likes, paid comments, things like that. So we really look to see, are the comments on the content genuine, or are they just emojis, or are they bots where someone's asking them something that's absolutely nothing related to their post? We look for those things. We look for a diversity of the type of content that they're creating. So is there going to be an opportunity to sort of fit this creator into a couple of different opportunities, or are they really, really niche where there might not be a ton of different brand opportunities for that creator? Are they somebody who has high engagement in terms of we'll take sort of the top 30 posts and do a bit of an engagement calculator, see sort of where that number hits. Most brands are looking for engagement minimum 3% is kind of the lowest that most brands will consider working with. So we kind of take that benchmark into consideration. And then down the road, we want to see before we sign someone on some of those analytics that you're not able to see by just looking at the channel. And that would be your Instagram story views. Link clicks has now become a really big one for conversion campaigns. So when you are doing a campaign for a brand on Instagram stories, how many people click the link to buy it to move to the sort of that next stage? So we do want to see those things as well. I think it's also important to understand where creators' audiences live. Being, in North America and working with mostly North American brands, if 80% of someone's audience is in Italy, even though they live in New York, they might not be the right fit for us, because most of the time, especially American brands, they want to see creators with at least 50% and more of their following based in the United States. So I think it's just kind of looking across all of the different analytics available and seeing if it's going to make sense. And if we can really feel like we have the right relationships, the right connections, and we see the right opportunities coming in through other creators that we can make fit with this new person.
Got it.
And are they this is a very intimate relationship that you have with your agent. We, some of the creators I work with, we're talking all day long. So as much as this is an easy thing to say, it's do we get along? Do we like each other? Are we going to enjoy this relationship dynamic, or are we going to have challenges in the way that we communicate? And we're big on boundaries, and we're an all-female team, and we have certain values and things that we kind of really strive for in the partnerships that we have. And I think just that piece, and that's why a video call is so important right off the beginning, because you can tell right away if that dynamic is going to be there of okay, we can crack jokes, we can get along, we've got good, personalities are aligning, and we can feel good about, the relationship.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot of, it's the intangibles that you can't really measure, just how how you feel when you're around somebody. Even if it's just on a video call, I mean, that can kind of tell you a lot as to whether or not, if your gut is telling you there might be a little something off here in terms of working together. I think it's, as much as the numbers and the metrics might suggest otherwise, it's important to listen to what your instincts might be telling you too.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, I want to shift gears again, kind of going back to talking about working with brands. in the travel space, there is a tendency, especially with tourism boards, or not a tendency, but it's kind of part of the landscape where tourism boards or hotels or hospitality companies, they, instead of offering pay for work, they may instead offer a trade, right? Like, hey, come to our hotel, you get a free 7-night stay, create as much content as you want, and that's it. There's no actual monetary payment. How do you go about negotiating pay with in those types of situations, and when is the right time to do that? Because maybe there might be situations where, yeah, you know what, a trade type situation makes sense. I'm okay with not asking for money, but obviously, like, financial compensation, that's what you need in order to live. if you're a creator doing this for
1,000%. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that reminds me of like the saying, like, I can't pay my bills with a watch, or like whatever this thing might be that you give me, right? Like, I think the biggest thing to consider is that idea of like, does this make sense for me, is like a good place to start. There are, we've worked on campaigns where the offering that the tourism board has come forward with has been incredible, and it would be very hard to turn that down. I think from a brand side, if you're not going to offer financial compensation, then they need to be really open about the deliverables and flexible in the deliverables. It's really hard to say, I'm not going to pay you to do this thing, but I need you to do like all of this stuff. And I think like that's where, as a creator or an agent, you can start to do a little bit of that negotiating of, if it is just an in-kind experience, then instead of 10 Instagram posts that you've asked for, like, we can do 3. Like, this is what the effort lift on our end aligns with the value of what you've given us from the in-kind experience. So I think it's always important to negotiate deliverables. People don't often consider that when it comes to budget and money, that's not the only factor that you can negotiate on. You can also negotiate on the exclusivity, on the usage, on the deliverables, on the timelines, things like that. So every single piece of any type of contract is negotiable. One thing that I will say too, I think like a lot of tourism brands, especially like giving credit to just coming out of a 2-year pandemic where a lot of them had like basically 0 vacancy for a very, very long time. The budgets just aren't there, but they still need to create content. They still want to host creators. So I think it's nice when brands are transparent up front. Like, I don't have any budget, but this is what I'm willing to offer you. The ones that come forward and say like, this is what I'd like to do. Do you have a rate card? Right away, you'll know, okay, we're looking at some budget. Typically, we don't charge our full rates for a tourism board because of all of the expenses that come along with putting that together, like flights, meals, accommodations, experiences, all that stuff. It really can add up depending on what it is that you're going to do. But the areas where there are opportunities to build in monetary compensation in those experiences is by selling content back to the brand to use for their promotions, paid advertising, or on their website. Maybe they need a new hero video for their website. So those are the places where you could say like, okay, I got this contract from X destination. I went to their website and I can see that they're in need of a couple 15-second videos or whatever it might be. Do your homework, kind of see where you can go back to them and say, I'm willing to come and do this, but would you be willing to work together on a content paid partnership, and I'll do the promotion stuff as an in-kind experience for what you're offering me. So I think like creators can, because a lot of creators are skilled photographers and videographers, so they can bring this extra layer and level of expertise to a brand that maybe they're not necessarily hiring them for, but that they could do while they're on destination.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I'm very passionate about this topic.
Oh yeah, for
sure. So, yeah, I think like it's the opportunity has to be worth it for the creator to want to do something like that. And I would say also for any creator that's going on a trip or building out an experience that they want to do, to reach out to brands to say, this is what I can offer you while I'm there. Like, will you cover these things and also kick back, X amount of money for this, and I'll create you a month's worth of social media content. Like that can be so consuming for a brand to have to come up with quality content for a whole month on social.
Oh, yes.
But from pulling user generated content to like then them having to hire someone to go do all of that. So I think it's just inserting your expertise and building a gap, like bridging a gap for a brand, for a travel brand that maybe they're not even seeing themselves. One of the tricky parts is that now a lot of places hire agencies as a middleman. So here you've got creator's talent manager, agency, brand. So there's like 4 people now working together. So you've got your brand that wants to work with the creator, but in order to work with the creator, they have to go through me. And in order for me to work with the brand, I have to go through them. And so there's all of these layers. So in those situations, it can be hard to get an agency to come around on what basically they've built out for the brand is what they're going to do for them. If that makes sense. So if they're like, okay, we're going to hire 5 creators. These are the deliverables. We're going to get them all to come. They're going to shoot and we're not going to pay them. But if I go to that agency and say, okay, well, we want, $500 and we're going to create X, Y, and Z. They're like, that's not within the scope of what we're working on. So like they shut it down right away. And oftentimes they'll make you sign as part of your contract that you're not able to speak directly to the brand. So it's like a bit of gatekeeping happening that makes tourism opportunities tricky sometimes when they're not dealt with directly with the tourism board or the provider that you're trying to build the content for.
Got it. One of the last things too I want to discuss with you as we get closer to wrapping up this phenomenal conversation is in terms of related to the idea of like pricing and setting, a fair rate for yourself and not underselling yourself to a brand or a company to work with them. How do you go about doing that? How do you go about thinking about what is the value that I can set here for the service that a creator is providing a brand?
Yeah. Actually, Lizzie just came up with a really amazing resource for creators to allocate sort of the number of hours it takes them to do a certain thing and then how they build out their pricing packages from there. So I would recommend if any creators are watching this to check that out on Lizzie Peirce's channel. But from an agency side, there's so many factors in a campaign that actually need to have a monetary compensation attached to it. So for sure, you've got at the very beginning, you can consider what the deliverables look like and what that's going to take the creator to just make that strictly alone. But then what opportunities is that creator having to decline because of the contract or the exclusivity that this brand has placed upon them? So if I'm a camera reviewer and I'm working with Sony, but now they've told me I can't work with any other camera companies for 6 months, I would look back at my previous year to say how many camera brands did I work with in a 6-month period of time and how much money did I make in that time? And then that is a line item. If you want my exclusivity and you only want me to speak to your brand, this is what it's going to cost you for that. We do for paid advertising, we do a mix of like a flat rate monthly fee to be able to use that creator's likeness in selling your product in a paid advertising space. Another way that people are doing it now is they're adding on like 5 to 7% of what the paid ad media spend is. So if a brand's going to put $20,000 behind that piece of content, the creator gets 5 to 7% of whatever that budget is. There's also like rush fees now too. So if a brand comes to you and says, hey, we want you to turn this content around in less than 2 weeks, and you're working on a couple of other things that are time sensitive, you might have to bring on new resources, an extra editor, someone like Video Husky to help you out. Like, who's paying for that? So figuring out what those extra fees are going to be and then building that again into the campaign too. There's things like how naturally and authentically can this fit into my brand? Is it going to be an easy transition to have this iPhone as my product? Sure it is, because I own one. Or is it like something a little more sensitive, like a prenatal vitamin or like nursing, something to do with nursing? Like, what is the level of intimacy or exposure that the creator is going to have to put themselves in to make the content that is required of them? That's another consideration of like where a fee goes. So I think a lot of the creators I work with, it's always a sliding scale of like, this is, the minimum of what it costs me to make this content happen. And then we kind of scale based on all of these kind of other pieces that layer in and add on from there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Kristen, the last question that I want to ask you is just kind of your, I guess, your predictions for the future, because it seems like we're in this weird space when it comes to marketing and advertising where, you know, there's a lot of controversy around programmatic advertising and really how effective it is. I mean, and you see platforms like Facebook kind of taking away some of that more specific kinds of ways that people can target people. And so it seems like this influencer creator space is just becoming a more important avenue or channel for brands to reach their target consumer. So I'm just kind of curious, like, how you think things are going to evolve, I guess, in like the next few years or so.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're all kind of wish we could look into the crystal ball and figure out what that means. But I don't know a ton about it, but I've been really interested in like keeping my eye to like this Web3 stuff and how influencers are sort of going to be integrating into that world. I also think we also have a production company here. And one thing that I've also kind of experienced through this is that creators are now becoming production companies for brands versus brands doing like $1 million shoots a year or like doing these big ads for Super Bowl and these other like big moments in time. Instead, they're looking to hire creators and have more content coming out on a more regular basis and leaning into sort of their audiences and expertise versus hiring just a third party or even having an in-house production company that's creating those assets for them. Right. So I think we're really going to see a shift in how influencers are being used not only for their trusted relationships with their audience, but how they're being used as videographers, photographers, and content creators for brands. I won't be surprised if, we start seeing like these big Super Bowl commercials shot on a phone in TikTok style from a TikToker. Like that's truly where I think a lot of that is going to be going. It's also interesting to pay attention to like these nano influencers and these micro influencers and how brands are really looking to working with those types of creators versus the Kardashians of the world and some of the bigger creators, because these ones are the ones that truly have influence and that can convert on a brand campaign more so than, some of the other ones, because it is that friend telling a friend dynamic that maybe some of the mega influencers kind of lose out on because that trust isn't there. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens next. It's always evolving. And I think there's just a lot of really cool creators out there and interesting podcasts and resources to kind of keep an eye on and see what other kind of folks are talking about.
Well, Kristen, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. It's been awesome to chat with you. I've learned quite a bit about what it's like, operating from an agency standpoint with creators. So as we wrap up again, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you, maybe reach out to you, maybe they're creators themselves and want to pitch you on potentially working with you. Where can they go and do that?
Absolutely. So we're at ModernSpeak.co and we're at ModernSpeak on Instagram, and we're based in Canada, but we work with creators all across North America on their brand partnerships. If anyone listening just even wants to chat about specific challenges that they're facing or areas of opportunity, I'm always happy to hop on a video call and discuss what's going on in your world. So feel free to hit me up. And I'm Kristyn at ModernSpeak.co. Kristyn.
Awesome.
And thank you for having me, Jonathan. This has been so fun.
Thank you. I'm glad. That's always what I aim to do, is hopefully make sure it's a fun experience for the guests. So I'm glad that you've enjoyed the time. I have enjoyed it as well. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. Want to remind you, if you haven't already, to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's where we're posting majority of the time all of the content that we get from these interviews. And also subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And join us on our email list too. Visit www.videocraftshow.com to sign up to our email list. It's one of the best ways to get regular updates on when new shows are live here for the Videocraft Show. As I wrap up, want to go ahead and give a shout out to Gio Fernandez, my guy producing and editing. He is the producer editor extraordinaire of the Videocraft Show. And also got to shout out Paulo Lopez for all of his help on graphics. Now, if you need a full editing team to help you edit your videos because you're sick, and tired of how much time it takes you, the hours and hours of time it takes you to edit your videos by yourself, and you're in luck. Visit www.videohusky.com to learn more. We can help you out there. I am Jon Santiago. Tune in next week, or actually every other week, for another interview, another episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky.